It's the dawn of the 20th century. A close-knit community of African Americans have established a thriving local economy with hundreds of Black-owned businesses, schools, churches, and a lot of other establishments located in the city of Tulsa, Oklahoma. This city of over 10,000 Black Americans have established a community with a net worth of over $60 million in today's money. This community was called the Oklahoma Greenwood District, but you may know it as Black Wall Street. Welcome to Alpha Perspective, a channel where we talk about anything from politics to the playoffs, or just about anything to educate you to become the best American that you can be. Now, to understand the history of Black Wall Street, first we must dive into the history of Black Americans in Oklahoma. Now, this story begins in 1830, where President Andrew Jackson signs into law the Indian Removal Act, effectively relocating over 100,000 Native Americans to lands west of the Mississippi River called the Indian Territory. Many Black slaves came to the new Oklahoma Territory via their Native American slave owners during the Trail of Tears. Now, many people don't know this, but in 1809, Native Americans held over 600 enslaved Africans brought over during the Atlantic slave trade and traded amongst themselves. And by 1835, this number was nearly 1,600, and that number had increased to around 4,000 by 1860. Now, traveling with these Native Americans was actually a West African enclave that lived side by side with refugee Seminoles in Florida. This group of 500 made the journey as free men. Those that survived the trip either remained enslaved until treaties between the United States and American Indian tribes were ratified, or lived among the tribes as Black Seminoles. By 1861, the conflict to decide the fate of all Americans had finally come, the American Civil War. During the Civil War, many freed slaves joined the Union forces stationed in the Indian Territory. In 1862, a group of freedmen and escaped slaves from Arkansas, Oklahoma, and even Texas formed the 1st Kansas Colored Volunteer Infantry. African Americans, Native Americans, and even white Americans fought side by side in 1863 for the first time in history during the Battle of Honey Springs. This decisive battle essentially ended the Confederate dominance in the West. By the end of the war and the order of the Emancipation Proclamation, the now African Americans had gone through so much. They had traveled with the Native Americans to the Oklahoma Territory during the Trail of Tears, and they had even fought side by side with white Americans in the American Civil War. But now these Black Americans were wondering, what now? Now, later in the 19th century, groups of African Americans would migrate to Oklahoma Territory in hopes for a new life and securing political freedoms. This land allocation led to a boom in all Black towns, including Greenwood. Now, between 1865 and 1920, the number of all Black towns and settlements had grew to more than 50. Now, today there are only about 13 all Black towns in existence, according to the Oklahoma Historical Society. Now, around 1901, Tulsa, Oklahoma was still a small town located on the banks of the Arkansas River when its first oil well was established. In 1905, when the Great Glenpool Oil Reserve was discovered, the town saw a boom of over 140,000 residents between 1901 and 1930. Greenwood Avenue was important because it ran north for over a mile from the Frisco Railroad yards, and it was one of the few streets that did not cross through both Black and white neighborhoods. It allowed Greenwood to stand alone as its own little district in the city. Greenwood didn't become the economic powerhouse that we know today until a wealthy Black landowner came along by the name of Ottawa W. Gurley. Gurley was born in Huntsville, Alabama in 1867 to formerly enslaved persons John and Rosanna Gurley. He grew up in the small town of Pine Bluff, Arkansas. There, Gurley was self-educated and attended some public schooling. And in 1984, Gurley graduated from Branch Normal College, now the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff. He was also a student of the prominent Pine Bluff educator Joseph Carter Corbin. Gurley later married Pine Bluff resident Emma Wells and opened his first general store. Now, everything changed in 1905 when Gurley sold his land in Pine Bluff and moved to the oil boom town of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Now, for some context, Oklahoma didn't become a state until around 1907, and its creation came with stringent segregation laws. Its first law was passed only 33 days after its creation. These laws required blacks and whites to live separately within the city. But still, Oklahoma was considered a significant economic and social opportunity by Gurley, politician Edward P. McCabe, and others, leading to the establishment of 50 all-black towns and settlements, among the highest of any state and territory. In 1906, Gurley purchased 40 acres of land, which he designated to be sold to coloreds only. Among Gurley's first businesses was a rooming house, which was located on a dusty trail near the railroad tracks. This road was given the name Greenwood Avenue, named after the city in Mississippi. The area became very popular among black migrants fleeing the oppression in Mississippi. They would find refuge in Gurley's buildings as racial persecution from the South was non-existent in Greenwood Avenue. J.B. Stratford arrived in Tulsa via railroad in 1898 with his wife, Augusta. Stratford was the son of a former slave from Kentucky who was given the name Caesar by his previous slave owner. Now, during Caesar's time in slavery, the owner's daughter befriended him and taught him how to read. Caesar's first son, J.B. Stratford, reinvested in his father's vision to become an Indiana University-trained attorney. Stratford's interests ranged from social justice and racial solidarity to real estate development, which he applied to an influx of black Americans streaming into the Indian Territory. The J.B. Stratford empire was comprised of real estate income from over 24 rental properties, worth nearly $2 million. The Stratford Hotel at 301 North Greenwood was his crown jewel. At the time, it was the largest black-owned, black-operated, and black guest-only hotel in America. The structure housed 45 modern living rooms, a gambling hall, dining room, saloon, and pool hall. Jazz from the Stratford Hotel and Commodore Cotton Club across the street filled Greenwood residents with the joy of freedom to dance and play without repercussions. Segregation in Oklahoma paved the way for Greenwood to become an insular hub for the black dollar to circulate. Many black residents earned and spent their money entirely within the confines of Greenwood. The result was one of the most affluent and wealthiest African American enclaves in the entire country. It was said Booker T. Washington visited Greenwood on his way to Boley, Oklahoma. Impressed by the growth and success of Greenwood, he coined it the Negro Wall Street of America, which evolved into Black Wall Street during the Civil Rights Movement. He believed that Greenwood set the example for a place that all black Americans should follow. He believed that black Americans could best achieve racial uplift through education, business, and self-determination, which at the time was both resonant and controversial. Other notable stories was John and Lola Williams, who became some of the wealthiest black people in Tulsa. They owned the Dreamland Theater on Greenwood Avenue, along with the rooming house, the confectionery, commercial rental property, and a garage. Women in Greenwood would often become entrepreneurs too. Lola Williams was very much a partner in the couple's business. Mabel Little from Boley, Oklahoma arrived in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1913 with only $1.25 in her pocket. Although wealthy black people lived in Greenwood, plenty still struggled, working long hours and living in shanties. But the money they spent in the district helped build the community. In 1914, Gurley's net worth was reported to be over $150,000, worth about $4.7 million in today's money. He was also made the sheriff's deputy by the city of Tulsa to police Greenwood's residents, which resulted in some viewing him as suspicious. By 1921, Gurley owned more than 100 properties in Greenwood and had an estimated net worth of between $500,000 and $1 million, which is about $16 million in today's money. By the 1920s, the Greenwood district had become well known in America as Black Wall Street, one of the most commercially successful and affluent majority African American communities in the entire United States. On Black Wall Street, there were African American attorneys, real estate agents, entrepreneurs, and doctors who offered their services in the community. Although Black Wall Street had reached a somewhat mythical status among the black community, that success wouldn't last long. A confrontation between residents of Greenwood and the residents of Tulsa, Oklahoma would push racial tensions in the U.S. to a boiling point. This is the story of the Tulsa, Oklahoma massacre. In the 20th century, the United States was marked by racial segregation and white supremacy. Many other residents resented the idea of black people achieving economic success and prosperity. Black Wall Street, with its thriving businesses and wealth, challenged the white-dominated social order at the time. Some white residents saw this as a threat to their own economic position and were envious of the community's success. Despite being forced to live separately due to segregation laws, the black community in Greenwood still thrived. This stark contrast between the economic validity of Black Wall Street and the struggling whites increased racial tensions. It all started with an encounter in an elevator between a 17-year-old white woman named Sarah Page and a 19-year-old black man by the name of Dick Rowland. It was alleged that Dick Rowland had assaulted Page in the elevator, which he denied, but it didn't matter. News of the black man assaulting a white woman spread like wildfire through the community of Tulsa, and tempers flared. After news reached Greenwood residents that a white mob had gathered in the city, black residents rushed to the Tulsa County Courthouse to prevent Rowland's lynching, while white residents were deputized by Tulsa police and even handed weapons. A confrontation broke out between the two mobs and a shot was fired. According to the police reports, all hell had broken loose and the two mobs exchanged gunfire. After hearing of this news, a white mob, to include some 10,000 people, descended upon the residents of Greenwood. Over the next 12 hours, the city of Greenwood experienced an all-out assault by shooting and arson and even aerial bombings by private planes. By the morning of June 1st, 1921, Greenwood had been completely destroyed. All 35 city blocks of Greenwood were decimated. Red Cross had reported that 1,256 homes and 191 businesses were destroyed that day. 10,000 black people were left homeless, and it's believed that as many as 300 people were killed. A research report out of Harvard University estimated that in $2020, a total financial loss of between $50 and $100 million were lost that day. Now, for many years, we've heard about the negative of what happened there on June 1st, 1921, but this story is so much bigger than that. This is the story of how just over 10,000 African Americans created one of the richest communities in the entire nation. Now, segregation remains a moral blot on America, yes, and a society segregated by race surely cannot stand in the coming centuries. But the fortunate thing about what we saw in those days was the unity amongst the black community. African Americans and the people of Greenwood had no other choice but to spend their money between black people and black businesses. In order to survive, they had to lift each other in a way unseen by nations. Now, the black community was resented, yes, but they were by no means weak. This story tells us of the determination to become self-reliant despite the rules of the institution. Though our history may be dark, Americans, no matter the form, are truly remarkable. Thank you for watching. Make sure you hit that subscription button and the notification bell to receive more updates on your history. Remember, work hard, never stop learning, never settle, and remember that Black history is every day. Be on the lookout for more videos like this on our segment, Black History is Every Day. Also be on the lookout for our new segment, The American Story, coming soon, only on Alpha Perspective.